Hey y'all, Rachel here. I want to tell you my young living story, but not so much the story about the essential oils and how they come into your life, because y'all have, if you have used oils and brought them in and incorporated them into your life, you know the goodness that they bring in. So there's a lot of those stories out there. I want to tell you more the story of how the business ended up in my life. So background on me, I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. I out in the country, which, believe it or not, there was actually country outside DC back then. I was climbing trees and running with the dogs, and if it gives you any indication of my childhood, please don't hate me, but I had a pony, for real. I had a good childhood. It was amazing. And then I grew up and went to college, finished my degree at the University of Colorado in Boulder, where again I was climbing trees and running with the dog and hiking and biking and camping and rock climbing and anything I could do to get out there and recreate in God's creation. It was just so glorious. And that's where I met my husband, who was an active duty Marine. So he was in the Marine Corps. And so once he graduated from the university, that's when our Marine Corps life began. We had two boys, which I was homeschooling, and we moved and we moved and we moved and we moved 11 times in 14 years. But one of the most glorious places that I got to live was, I was so blessed to spend 4 amazing years in Japan. That was just the peak of our time and of our lives. It was just incredible. And that is where I met my friend in my upline who introduced me to essential oils. And of course I was like, oh, they smell great. And I took them into my house, and it was something that, of course, I fell in love with them. But then I read the book Healing Oils of the Bible by Dr. David Stewart, which I believe every oiler needs to read, because that book is so packed with just powerful truth that I just felt like God was tapping me on the shoulder to be like, this is the message that I want you to take to the world. And I was like, okay, I don't know. But I mean, I was so on fire with the message from that book and with the oils themselves that I kind of just started sharing with everyone that I knew. I knew nothing about oils, you guys, nothing. It was ignorance on fire, believe me. But I was definitely on fire and super excited about this whole Young Living thing. And that is when the bottom fell out of our lives. No kidding. Unexpectedly, undeservedly, out of the clear blue sky, my husband lost his job. It was through, no fault of his own. He had put in 21 years of dedicated, immaculate service to the Marine Corps. There was no rhyme or reason to it other than that they were restructuring things and they were downsizing, and he'd already had 21 years, and so he got the axe. And there we were overseas in Japan, and our whole entire life just fell apart. We hadn't planned for him to be out of a job. We didn't have a savings account for retirement. We didn't have any money to get us through. We had to spend every last penny of our savings account just to get home from Japan with the dog and the cat and the kids and all the travel expenses. We'd sold my car, so I didn't even have a vehicle. We picked up our remaining vehicle in California, and we limped it all the way back to the East Coast, where we basically just washed up on the shores on my family's doorstep, homeless, penniless, destitute, without a job. My husband didn't even know how to dress himself, right? He had to go out and get suits and ties and shirts and shoes and civilian clothes, because they've always given him a uniform. He had to go and try to, do job interviews. He'd never done job interviews before. He had to go out and figure out how to network and meet people in a town where we knew absolutely nobody because we'd never lived there before. So it was this crazy, impossible task. And here we are living in, my family's home, which very quickly turned sour because one member of our family who had appeared gracious in providing us a place to live very quickly turned on us because he felt that we had been there too long, and this was about 6 months or so time, and made it very, very apparently clear that he thought that my husband was a loser. Why didn't he have a job? Why didn't he just go get a job at McDonald's? Stop mooching off of he was tired of us mooching off of him, in his opinion, and living off of his hard-earned money. And it got to be so toxic at that point that we just pretty much took the first job that came along, which happened to land us in Las Vegas, which is the last place on planet Earth I ever hoped to live, other than the Middle East, that is. And so we found ourselves living in a trailer in the desert with no plumbing. If you ever want to bottom out in life, you live in a trailer in the desert with no plumbing. It really was a very, very dark time for us. I'm going over to the bathhouse at an RV park and like getting buckets of water so that we can do our dishes and brush our teeth and like flush our toilet with, right? It was bad. And it was right about that time that Young Living kind of entered into my life for the second time, right? The first time was in Japan when my friend introduced me to the oils, and then our lives just crashed and burned like you wouldn't believe. And here I am living in a trailer in the desert. And that's when my friend called me up and she was like, you can do Young Living as a business. Have you ever thought about that? And I was like, I don't know, I need to, because you know what? Watching my husband go through the stress and the strain of like having to try to figure out how to transition from one career to another with like, and the stress and the strain of all of that, I brought nothing to the table. I couldn't help him. I couldn't go get a job. I'd been a stay-at-home spouse. My resume was a blank piece of paper. I was a homeschool mom. I would have had to throw my kids in school. I didn't know what that was even going to look like. We didn't know where we were going to live. There weren't any schools in the district. Like, I was like a completely helpless person, and that hurt because there was nothing I could do to help him bridge the gap during this incredibly painful time of life. I was an absolute helpless person. And I remember just sitting there thinking, all I could do is go and like get a job handing out shopping carts at Walmart, and how is that going to get us through? How is that going to pay for a family of 4 with all of our food and with rent and with, electricity and hopefully someday plumbing, there was nothing I could do. I was like in this completely helpless position. And so my friend tapped me on the shoulder and was like, why don't we do this Young Living thing? And I was like, why not? What do I have to lose? I've pretty much lost everything, except for my family, and our health. So other than that, it was like, let's make a run for this thing, because if there's one thing that I knew, it was that I was not going to stay in the place where I was. I was going to do everything in my power to move forward and get us out of the situation that we were in. And, it didn't happen fast and it didn't happen quickly. And my husband did get a job. We are now in a house and not in the same destitute living situation that we were in before. But it was really at that time when Young Living just kind of came in and gave me, in a time that was just black and dark, and guys, it was not good. And it just gave me hope. And I know that we're supposed to find our hope in the Lord, and I do. But sometimes he uses certain vehicles in our life to bring that hope to us, right? And so my team that for Young Living is called Promise Life, and that is based on Jeremiah 29:11, which is, for I know the plans that I have for you, plans to prosper and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. And so I named my Young Living team Promise Life because those are the promise that I'm clinging to, that there will be a life beyond this, beyond where we were sitting at that moment, which was so dark and so desolate and so desperate. That's the time when I read the D. Gary Young book, and I just wept, and I wept because of the beauty of this man's story and the beauty of the story of Young Living. This company that I just happened to stumble across in Japan is now going to come in and provide for me what it did for Gary. Like, his story was one of no hope and destitution and just complete loss when he was paralyzed. And then through discovering these different supplements and essential oils, like, it gave him life again, and he started this beautiful, amazing thing. And it has a message of truth to bring to everybody else. And that truth is that, God made the Garden of Eden. He put Adam and Eve in a garden, not in a house, not in a city, not in a place full of ding-dongs and ho-hos and Cheetos and pizza, right? Not in a place with cinder block and glass and asphalt, right? He gave us a garden. He gave us his plants. He gave them for our food and for our fuel and for our housing and for our medicine. And they work so much better than anything man could ever produce because they have the wisdom of God in them. And that is his creation, that he has gifted to us everything that we need to inhabit this planet that he created for us. And I know that that is what Gary Young saw. And that is the vision that he had, to put essential oils into the hands of, every single family on planet Earth, because that was God's vision. That is what his truth is. That was what the message of Young Living is to help people into wellness and help them out of whether it's sickness or disease or depression or whatever their situation is, or to help them out of their financial situation. That is what Young Living brings. It brings the promise of a hope and a future if you just live your life in the way that honestly that God intended. And that's what these essential oils are, to live our life free of toxins, to live our life free of disease, to live our life free of being financially stressed and burdened and overwhelmed with the things of this world. We can break free from that, right? Young Living to me is this thing that is truth, and it's God's truth, and it's the truth that he would have me to bring and share to everyone else, and it's the vehicle by which I truly believe that he has given me a hope and a future. And those are the plans that he has for me, and not just me, everybody on Promise Life team, everybody who has ears to hear, let them listen and hear the message of truth that is not only in his word, that is in his creation, that we just need to get out there and share with everyone. So that is truly my heartbeat. That is what brought me to the business of Young Living. It's so much more than I really like how these oils smell and I want to share it with people. There's this hope and this truth and this promise of this incredible future that comes with this business. At least that's what it's been for me.